You're listening to From Stillness, an audiobook for a mind in need of quiet. You've probably imagined it more than once, being untouchable, calm in the face of criticism, unshaken by rejection, immune to loss, betrayal, disappointment. You've fantasized about that version of you, composed, steady, in control. The kind of person who no longer flinches when life throws its sharpest edges. But the truth is, you're tired. Tired of holding it together. Tired of pretending you don't feel the sting. Tired of performing strength while silently aching inside. And maybe, just maybe, what you've truly longed for all along isn't invincibility. It's rest. It's peace. A moment where you don't have to defend your value, where you don't have to be unaffected, impressive, or endlessly composed. A moment where you're allowed to feel everything without being undone by it. But here's the uncomfortable truth no one tells you. As long as you keep trying to outrun pain, it will keep chasing you. As long as you build your worth around being unaffected, the smallest crack will feel like a collapse. And that's not weakness. That's what happens when we're taught to survive by suppression. Carl Jung once said, "We are not what happens to us, but what we choose to become." And what you become begins the moment you stop avoiding, the moment you stop armoring up, the moment you let go of needing to be above it all. You don't become free by becoming indifferent. You become free by becoming whole. So if you're here because you're tired of pretending, if you're done performing strength while silently breaking, welcome. You're not here by accident. You're ready, not to run anymore, but to turn inward and begin the only journey that ever mattered, back to yourself. We all do it, in one way or another. We try to avoid pain, we distract ourselves, we stay busy, we tell ourselves we're fine. We build lives designed to minimize discomfort, perfect the image, keep the peace, don't take it personally. We believe that if we're smart enough, kind enough, strong enough, maybe we'll finally earn a life that doesn't hurt. But here's the paradox. The more we try to outrun pain, the more it owns us. The more we suppress it, the louder it gets. Not through screams, but through restlessness, anxiety, overthinking, burnout. Avoiding pain doesn't protect you. It traps you in it. You think it's the world that's hurting you, the criticism, the rejection, the silence, the betrayal. But those things only pierce you deeply when they find somewhere soft to land inside. The truth is, what hurts you most isn't what happened. It's what it touched within you. The wound it reawakened, the story it reinforced. Pain is not the enemy. It's a mirror. It shows you where you're still bleeding, where something remains unseen, unmet, unhealed. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows in size." And this is the trap. You're not weak because you feel pain. You become fragile when you spend your life trying not to. When you make invulnerability the goal, you create a self that is constantly on edge, scanning for danger, managing perception, fearing exposure. But strength isn't found in resistance. It's found in awareness. So ask yourself, what pain have you been trying to outthink, outwork, outrun? Because maybe the only way through is through. Why do some words break you while others just brush them off? Why does one conversation leave you shattered while someone else shrugs and moves on? It's not because you're too sensitive. It's not because you're weak. It's because something inside you recognized the echo and it hurt. What pierces you today is rarely about the moment itself. It's about the history it touches. That sharp comment, that dismissive tone, that abandonment, they reopen something much older, something still alive. Pain doesn't always come from what's said or done. It comes from what it activates within. The words you heard may be new, but the ache they stirred, that's been there for a while. Maybe it started in childhood. Maybe it grew quietly in relationships where love came with conditions. Maybe it formed around moments where you weren't seen, weren't chosen, weren't enough. And now, when life bumps into those old wounds, it feels overwhelming, disproportionate. But it's not irrational, it's unresolved. Carl Jung believed that the pain we feel in the external world is a reflection of what we haven't yet faced within. Which is why no amount of managing people or perfecting life will truly protect you. Because until you meet that pain at its source, the world will keep finding ways to point you back to it, So no, you're not overreacting. You're over-remembering. You're responding to layers of hurt that were never given the space to heal. And this isn't a flaw. It's an invitation to stop bracing against life and start listening to what's asking to be seen inside you. You think you're in control. You believe you make conscious choices, react reasonably, feel things for good reasons. But beneath all that, something quieter is pulling the strings, the unconscious. Carl Jung said it plainly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And that's what many of us are doing without even knowing. We're living out old patterns, reenacting ancient wounds, responding to life not with awareness but with programming. You think you're just bad at relationships, but maybe you're unconsciously drawn to the same emotional dynamic you learned early on and trying to resolve it through repetition. You think you just get angry out of nowhere, but maybe that anger is a messenger for a boundary you've never learned to set. You think you're just not good enough, but maybe that belief has never been yours, just something you inherited, absorbed, carried. The unconscious isn't just some shadowy space of forgotten dreams. It's alive. It's active. And if left unexamined, it becomes the blueprint for every emotion, every decision, every self-sabotage you can't explain. This is why healing isn't just about what you do. It's about what you become aware of. Because awareness doesn't erase your past, but it stops the past from running your present. The unconscious speaks in triggers, in overreactions, in the ache behind your smile, in the unexplained sadness when everything seems fine. Not to punish you, but to awaken you. You can't control what you don't yet see. But once you see, you begin to choose. And that's where freedom begins, not with fixing yourself, but with finally understanding what's been moving within you all along. We've been taught that strength looks like indifference, that to be emotionally strong is to stay unfazed, unaffected, above it all. We build a mask of composure, keep our voices calm, our expressions neutral, our hearts guarded. We say, "I don't care," while quietly breaking. We say, "I'm fine," when we're anything but. But pretending to be strong doesn't make you strong. It makes you invisible, even to yourself. Because the more you perform invulnerability, the more you disconnect from what's real. And when you disconnect, you lose access to the very qualities that actually make you resilient: honesty, clarity, compassion, self-awareness. The danger isn't in feeling too much. It's in never knowing what you're really feeling. It's in becoming so good at managing perception that you forget how to recognize your own needs. And one day, the mask gets heavy. The script wears thin. And the silence you carry begins to echo. Carl Jung said, "Know all the theories, master all the techniques, but when you touch a human soul, be just another human soul." But we don't allow ourselves to be souls. We become roles. We perform competence. We curate strength. But real strength isn't loud. It isn't flawless. It's quiet, rooted, honest. It's the ability to say, "This hurts," without shame. To say, "I don't know," without fear. To let the armor go, not because you're falling apart, but because you no longer need to pretend you never were. You weren't born to be untouchable. You were born to be real. And there is no strength more unshakable than that. You've probably spent a lot of time trying to fix yourself, trying to eliminate your flaws, silence your fears, overwrite your insecurities. You read more, do more, push harder, hoping that one day you'll wake up as someone who's finally beyond pain. Someone who doesn't feel shame, who no longer struggles, who has, at last, become enough. But wholeness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from integration. Carl Jung didn't believe in becoming flawless. He believed in becoming whole. That means you don't need to remove your darkness, you need to bring it into the light. You don't need to erase your pain, you need to understand what it's trying to show you. The parts of you you've tried to hide, deny, avoid, they don't disappear. They just operate in the dark. And as long as they're hidden, they control you. But when you meet them, gently, curiously, something shifts. The shame begins to soften. The fear begins to settle. You stop fighting yourself. And in that moment, your strength doesn't come from force. It comes from peace. Integration is not passive, it's powerful. It requires you to sit with discomfort, to hold what's messy without needing to resolve it right away, to say, yes, this too is part of me, and mean it. Not with pride, but with compassion. Because when every part of you has a seat at the table, not just the polished ones, you stop fragmenting. You become solid, clear, rooted. You stop overreacting. You stop overcompensating. You start responding with awareness. You don't become untouchable by being flawless. You become untouchable by being whole. You were taught to fear pain, to treat it like something wrong, something shameful, something to suppress, outrun, or numb. So you did. You kept busy. You stayed distracted. You smiled when you didn't mean it. You told yourself to be grateful, to stay strong, to move on. But pain doesn't vanish just because we pretend it's not there. It waits. And if ignored long enough, it changes form. It becomes anxiety, anger, numbness, a fatigue that no amount of sleep can touch. You think you're doing fine, and then, out of nowhere, it crashes in. But what if pain isn't here to break you? What if it's here to awaken you? Carl Jung saw suffering as a message, not a malfunction. Depression, he said, is like a lady in black. If she appears, don't shoo her away. Invite her in. Offer her a seat. Listen to what she has to say. Pain, in this way, is not your enemy. It's a part of you that's been waiting, patiently, to be heard. There is a reason the ache returns in stillness, a reason it comes back when the noise dies down. It's not because you're weak, it's because your soul is finally speaking. The truth is, much of your pain isn't punishment. It's friction between who you've learned to be and who you actually are. Growth hurts. Awakening hurts. Letting go of what no longer serves you hurts. But it's not a wound. It's a birth. So next time pain visits, don't ask, how do I get rid of this? Ask instead, what part of me is asking to be seen? Because sometimes the pain isn't there to destroy you. It's there to bring you home. There comes a point when the distractions no longer work. When the mask gets too heavy, when pretending you're fine costs more than admitting you're not. That's usually when something deeper begins to stir. A quiet knowing that you can't keep living on the surface, not if you want to feel truly alive. Jung called this the process of individuation, the journey of becoming who you really are. Not who the world told you to be. Not who you became to be safe, accepted, or admired. But the version of you that emerges when nothing is left to prove. It's not a comfortable path. It doesn't flatter the ego. It doesn't promise certainty or quick results, because to individuate is to unlearn, to dissolve the persona, to stand naked in front of your own truth and say, this is me, the light and the shadow, the strength and the softness. It requires courage, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind, the kind that sits with discomfort, faces the inner critic, listens to the hurt child within, and chooses to stay. Individuation means you stop outsourcing your worth. You stop needing the world to validate your existence. You realize no one else can complete you, because you were never missing in the first place, only disconnected. And slowly, something shifts. You no longer fear your emotions because you've met their source. You no longer panic in silence because you're no longer a stranger to yourself. You don't need to be untouchable, because you're no longer running from the parts that feel. That's what real freedom looks like. Not perfection, wholeness. And it begins not when you escape your pain, but when you're finally willing to walk with it all the way home. Growth is lonely, not because something's wrong, but because something's real. As you begin to wake up to who you truly are, you start to notice not everyone is willing to go there with you. The conversations that once felt satisfying now feel hollow. The spaces that once felt like home now feel tight. The masks people wear begin to feel louder than their voices. And suddenly, you're not lonely because you're unloved. You're lonely because you no longer belong where pretending is the norm. This isn't rejection, it's realignment. As you start living with more honesty, more presence, more awareness, you naturally drift from those still anchored in avoidance. Not because you're better, but because you're now guided by something deeper than approval. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that privilege requires letting go. Letting go of personas, expectations, even some connections. It requires space, and space often feels like solitude before it feels like peace. Maturity isn't loud. It doesn't need to explain itself. It simply knows what no longer fits and moves forward anyway. You don't isolate because you're broken. You create space because you're healing. And in that space, you begin to meet yourself. Not the edited version, but the one underneath it all. The one who doesn't need to be loud to be real. The one who doesn't chase belonging because they've found it within. So if you feel the ache of distance, know this. You're not falling apart. You're falling into alignment. You've spent years searching for protection. From judgment. From abandonment. From the ache of not being enough. You've tried to shield yourself with perfection, with achievement, with control. You believed that if you just did everything right, if you were good enough, strong enough, needed enough, maybe nothing could hurt you again. But pain still came. Disappointment still found you. And no matter how thick the armor, it was never quite enough. Because the shield you were looking for was never made of strength. It was made of awareness. Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." And maybe now you're ready to stop resisting. Ready to stop fighting the world in order to protect what's fragile inside. Ready to stop waiting for life to stop hurting, and instead begin seeing clearly why it hurts, where it touches, and how it teaches. The moment you become conscious of what moves within you, your stories, your wounds, your beliefs, you stop being controlled by them. People may still disappoint you. Life may still shift beneath your feet, but it no longer shatters you. Because now you understand what comes from outside only has power when it echoes what remains unseen within. And the more conscious you become, the less there is to protect. Because when nothing inside you is disowned, nothing outside you is threatening. That's the clarity you've been looking for. Not invulnerability, not indifference, but presence. Peace. A center so steady that the world can turn wildly around you, and you remain whole. There's a kind of strength the world doesn't teach, the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't armor up, doesn't pretend. It's the strength of someone who has stopped running from themselves. Someone who has turned inward, faced the ache, and chosen to stay. Real resilience isn't about becoming untouchable. It's about becoming whole. Because when you stop resisting your pain, you start listening to it. And when you listen, you realize your triggers are teachers, your discomfort is data, your wounds are maps, pointing you back to what still needs care. Carl Jung said that what remains unconscious will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. But awareness changes everything. The moment you begin to understand why something hurts, you loosen its grip. The moment you stop trying to fix your emotions and start integrating them, you create space for peace. And this is where freedom begins, not in being untouched by life, but in no longer being undone by it. So no, you don't need to be stronger, tougher, better. You just need to be more present, more honest, more willing to sit with what's real. Because when you stop needing protection from yourself, you stop needing protection from the world. And that's when you finally begin to live.